The Ten Commandments are found in Exodus and also in Deuteronomy. In Exodus chapter 20, verses 4 to 6, we have the words of the Second Commandment, and I will give them basically from memory from the King James. I have a different translation in front of me, but if I recall the Ten Commandments correctly, and I had to memorize them when I was a boy, and I've gone over them so many times since that I've probably made some adjustments in the way I have the words. But in the first commandment, God says that you shall have no other gods before me. And the second commandment says, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, nor any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. That commandment is lumped with the first commandment by part of the church, by the Roman Catholic Church, and I believe also the Lutheran Church, and I believe also the Eastern Orthodox people tend to combine them. Their way of grouping the commandments differ a little bit. The Protestant Reformation people have always taken those verses, however, with the exception of the Lutheran people, have taken those verses to be the second commandment in the Ten Commandments. I was surprised when I learned that the Second Commandment deals with a separate principle from the First Commandment, which says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And the idea being that the Second Commandment prohibits images of the true God. So that has a lot of impact, a lot of significance, a lot of importance for a lot of different subjects. And let's give ourselves a few minutes just to look at the commandment itself and what it means. When he says that you're not to make for yourself any graven image or any likeness of anything that's in heaven above or earth beneath or the water under the earth, does that mean that we cannot have photographs? Does it mean we can't make sculptures of animals? Does it mean that we can't have any of this kind of artwork? And people have often thought that that's what it did mean. A very casual reading of the verse would indicate, it could be read that way very easily, could be understood to mean that all imagery is forbidden by the Lord. However, that does not fit in the totality of Scripture, because God himself commanded that certain images be made. He did not punish, speak against various images that people had. But the only ones that God consistently opposed were images, likenesses of created things that people used as representations of the Lord. For instance, things that people would make a painting and say, give the name to the painting, a name of God. Solomon's head of Christ might come in that category. Some image that somebody made, some painting, and give it the name of Christ. So my understanding is, and I think you'll find that this is supported by the rest of the Bible, that this is not prohibiting all artwork. It's only prohibiting images that people make unto themselves, for themselves, of any created being as something that they would bow down to, something that they would consider as a representation to worship God in heaven. Then going on from that, it says that God is jealous. Evidently he's speaking of those images, and he's saying that he is jealous of them. He's not saying they represent him. He's saying that they are competitors for his love. He's jealous of them. He goes on to use the word iniquity in this commandment, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children. So they're called sin. Now, when we use them, as I used them before I understood the issue, I thought of them as expressing my love to the Lord. I use them as aids to devotion. I use them in my Sunday school evangelistic work, we would use them to represent Christ. But God is calling them iniquity. So we're going to have to think about that some, I know, and look at it in the rest of the Bible. But here the understanding is that God is calling them something that He's jealous of, even though we use them to represent Him, and He calls them iniquity. And then He goes on to say that He visits this iniquity upon the children, the grandchildren of those who use the images. Sometimes people have thought, well, this is unfair for God to punish the children for what the fathers did. However, others have observed that this is just the law of inheritance, that children have only, they receive their concept of God from what they see their parents have, from what their parents teach them. And so when children see their parents, their fathers, using an image and using it as a representation of Christ, then they think that's a picture of Christ. And after another generation comes along, it's all the more ingrained. This is our concept of Christ, this image. We can use this Solomon's head and use it as our concept of Christ. And so that, in that sense, we can see that the iniquity, the images of the fathers, which He calls sin, which He's jealous of, that's given to the children. It's visited upon the children of those who use the images to the third and fourth generation. But He also says that those who really love Him, He blesses to the countless generations as they love Him. And how do they love Him? They do it by keeping His commandments. Those who love Me and keep My commandments. So this is again something that John speaks about in his letter, his epistle, and in the first epistle in particular, that loving God involves keeping His commandments. It's a biblical theme, that if we really love God, we don't invent our images for Him, but we listen to what He says in His Word, and then we keep His commandments. So I think we'll find that this commandment is a very exciting one. It has all kinds of significance for us when we study symbolism, when we study what's happened in the church, when we see what happens when God does visit the iniquity upon the children of those who use them. We'll see the significance it has. We'll see its relationship to what Paul says in his epistle to the Romans when he speaks about the foolishness of men who exchange the glory of God for images, and how God then gave them over to corrupt their own bodies. And it's basic to the problem of many of the problems of humanity, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and to the third and fourth generation of them that hate Me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love Me and keep My commandments. So I trust as we study the commandment and trace this matter through the Bible, that God will give us a heart to want to know what His Word tells us about who He is and how we're to live and how we're to obey Him, and that God will give us a heart to obey, and He'll give us minds and hearts to understand what the issues are.